report.
Tonight, Anthony Albanese digs himself a bigger hole over his sexist joke about Japan's Prime Minister. Donald Trump limits vaccinations, repeating a hoax claim about links to autism. And should shop signs include English? One council now says, oh yes. Plenty more today, including Victorian Opposition Leader Jess Wilson and Matt Canavan. But first, the news today tells us it is time to hold these scaremongers accountable. We can't let them get away again with these fake climate scares that have panicked Australians into wasting hundreds of billions of dollars to save us from a fake climate catastrophe. Now, there are two fake scares above all that these scaremongers have peddled to terrify Australians. And the first, of course, was this famous one from a mammal expert, Tim Flannery, who the Gillard Labor government then rewarded by making him our first climate commissioner.
Even the rain that falls isn't actually going to fill our dams and our river system.
No, you've seen the floods and full dams since then that have shown how unbelievably wrong that was. But the other big scare, and I think this one was made more often, was the one that Labor Prime Minister Julia Gillard at the time used to explain why she was going to make us pay a carbon tax.
We know that our planet is warming, meaning that great icons like the Great Barrier Reef are at risk.
Oh, yes, we've heard that so often ever since, pay the climate taxes, or the Great Barrier Reef gets it. I mean, what a con. But how often have, climate scaremongers treated the reef as their hostage? I mean, you could just go back 26 years when Australia's chief reef threatener, Professor Oviel Gulberg, who I've wrestled with for years, claimed the Great Barrier Reef faced destruction within the next century. And that, of course, has been the story ever since. In fact, the Australian Institute for Marine Science claimed in 2012 that half the Great Barrier Reef would be gone in under 30 years. But then the Australian Academy of Science researchers trumped even that just 5 years ago. Herb Goldberg was part of that too, claiming that up to 99% of Australia's Great Barrier Reef could be wiped out by 2025. Like, last year. And of course, David Attenborough happily flogged the scare as well.
We're heading for a future in which the Great Barrier Reef is a coral graveyard.
A coral graveyard! By now! By last year! I mean, oh dear, because how embarrassing. The same Australian Institute of Marine Science this week admits that actually, far from the Great Barrier Reef being wiped out already, it is near record coral cover. Near record. How wrong can you get? Their findings were used by a scientist I'll interview in a second to produce this telling graphic you're seeing. But even after 26 years of alarmists being proved wrong like that, this is how this good news was written up. Coral returns to Great Barrier Reef, but risks remain. Risks remain? What risks? I mean, the risk of climate crusaders yet again telling us to pay billions of dollars for mad climate policies, or you get the drill, the reef will die. If you think I'm being too hard on these experts, bear two things in mind. One, the shocking cost of all the climate schemes we've been panicked into funding, hundreds of billions of dollars. And two, these scaremongers who did all that get showered with prizes and government funding, fawning ABC coverage, while the professor who called out their alarmism years ago was sacked for not being collegiate. That man was Dr. Peter Ridd, a marine physicist and former head of physics at James Cook University. I mean, seriously, what a world when the man who was right must pay and the people who are wrong and frightened the whole country, they prosper. Joining me is that professor who was sacked after calling out the Great Barrier Reef scare, Dr. Peter Ridd. Peter, always great to see you. And it's always the same thing. Whenever I talk to you, yet more evidence that you were right and they were wrong. these latest reef results, what do they show you?
They show obviously that the reef is in wonderful condition. Yes, it goes through ups and downs, as that graph shows, but at the moment it's in wonderful condition. More coral in the last 6 years than any of the previous 35 years since records began. But it also shows that our science institutions are basically untrustworthy. We've had over 60 years of Great Barrier Reef doomism. And really what this shows us is that we've got to actually start to hold the institutions to account. We've actually got to start to do something about this. That one of the things that you haven't mentioned is that, yes, there's a whole lot of, I reckon probably $300 to $400 million a year is spent to save the reef. But at a lower level that people don't notice is that all the farmers up and down this coast have all these crazy regulations slapped on them. And we've been working to try to actually get these removed, or at least to check the science behind some of those regulations. And I can talk to you about how well that is going with a Liberal National Party government, which we have in Queensland at the moment. But basically what has to be done now is that it is quite clear that the science institutions have got it wrong, and we've now got to hold them to account and fix up the regulations that have been based on that bad science.
Yes, the farmers, of course, faced restrictions on nutrient runoff and all that kind of thing, was also supposedly destroying the reef. Listen, is there much danger from man-made warming to the reef?
No, really there isn't. I mean, the best coral on Earth, the most diverse coral on Earth is actually in Papua New Guinea and Indonesia, in a place they call the Coral Triangle. It has another name, which is the Indo-Pacific Warm Pool, because it's the warmest water on Earth, and that's where the coral is most diverse and it grows the fastest. So if anything, coral are going to do very well. But one of the things that really disappoints me, I get grumpy with those science institutions pushing out all these doomism, but I kind of expect it. But what has really disappointed me is that we've been trying with some agricultural organisations to get this science checked. And the Chrysophylle government has told us basically, no, they will not check any of this science. And to check it would only cost a few $100,000 within the new Queensland Productivity Commission. This is at the state level. The Chrysophylle government, a Liberal national government, said no, they will not do that. And then they gave another $300 million to exactly the science institutions that have been giving us this dross for so long. So I'm actually getting at a stage now where I'm really tired of a Liberal National Party government doing absolutely nothing. Now, at the federal level, you've got people like Matt Canavan who are right behind, I think, checking the science. I don't know where Angus Taylor is, but at the state level, the Chrysophylle government has effectively nurtured Labor laws, nurtured Labor-funded organisations to make regulations that is smashing our farmers based on unchecked science. And this is where something is going to need to be done. And we're going to actually be looking at all the parties at the federal level and even One Nation to ask, will they support Check the Science? Will we be able to do something about this Chrysophylle government that is doing nothing to solve this problem?
Well, you mentioned Matt Canavan. He's going to be exactly my next guest, so I shall ask him just that. Peter Ridd, thank you very much indeed. The Prime Minister today just dug himself even deeper into his latest sexism scandal. And I don't mean the one where he said, he'd like to shag Kylie Minogue. I mean this one, mocking Japan's Prime Minister, Sanai Takaichi, and a gift to him of one ceremonial melon. Albanese turning it into a crass sexist joke.
The Japanese Prime Minister brought a melon. Got a couple of melons. Got a couple of melons. She brought two, as you do.
Today, Albanese was twice asked in Parliament if he'd apologise to Takaichi and twice refused to do so.
On the Deep Bush podcast, filmed at the Lodge, the Prime Minister made a series of foul-mouthed, classless comments about women. Will the Prime Minister personally apologise to the Prime Minister of Japan, Her Excellency Sanai Takaichi, for his disrespectful behaviour?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I reject the assertion in the question.
Just verbaled him.
Australia and Japan have never been closer or more strategically aligned.
Pathetic, although I should add, Mary Aldred, if you're going to talk about disrespect to the Prime Minister of Japan by our Prime Minister, perhaps you should learn how to pronounce her name. But anyway, meanwhile, a Takeichi confidant, former Ambassador Shingo Yamagami, poured on the pressure today on News24, making clear the damage Albanese had done, including on Japanese social media.
If you take a close look at, what's being said on Japanese SNS, certainly, this has made an impact on our, otherwise, special strategic partnership. Does Prime Minister, Albanese owe Japanese an apology? It's up to Prime Minister of Australia to decide.
Now, as I said last night, Albanese yesterday defended himself by releasing a note that the Japanese government sent him 4 weeks ago, saying it realised this joke wasn't ill-intentioned, it's not going to take any action, a very classy peace offering. But today it seems the Japanese were surprised that Albanese has now made this private face-saver public, and even in self-justification. The Nightly reports a senior Japanese official speaking on the condition of anonymity, given the sensitivity of the matter, confirmed to the Nightly that they were surprised that the letter had emerged publicly in Australia. So it seems Albanese just made things worse with Japan. But what doesn't surprise me is that Albanese's Minister for Women, Katie Gallagher, one of the government's so-called mean girls, today actually defended his sexism.
The comments and the remarks from the Prime Minister have been misinterpreted. The Prime Minister is very clear that he did not mean for those comments to be interpreted in the way they have by some media outlets and by our political opponents.
She does it with a straight face. It's remarkable. Joining me is our Tuesday regular, Senator Matt Canavan, now the leader of the Nationals. Matt, should Albanese apologise to Japan's Prime Minister?
I think he has to do more than that, Andrew. I think a public apology now, simply after some pressure on him to do so, might not look heartfelt and look a bit insincere, just to get him out of a bind. I think former Ambassador Shingo Yamagami's proposal there that he's put would make more sense. And if there's not time in the Prime Minister's diary to travel to Japan, a simple phone call could easily be arranged, surely. Because I particularly think after the release of this private correspondence to get the PM out of a jam, he needs to clean this mess up. It's not pretty. It's not great given the close relationship we've had with Japan. I don't agree with the Prime Minister that somehow it's never been better, this relationship. The Labor Party seems to think everything's never been better. First home buyers never had it better. The economy's never been better. Wages have never been better. I think they're wrong about all those things, and they're also wrong about this relationship, because I know, speaking to lots of my Japanese colleagues and counterparts, that they are very concerned that as a country we're not as reliable anymore on things like energy because of our craziness on net zero and renewables. They rely on us for their energy. They've been very good customers of ours for a long time, but we're threatening that because we're not focused on producing energy anymore. We're focused on paying tribute to global idols that just make us poorer as a nation.
Well, speaking of that, talking about getting poorer, Matt, we're already paying $150 million for Energy Minister Chris Bowen to be President of Negotiations, El Presidente, for the United Nations' next big climate conference. Channel 7 tonight reports that he's now going to pay another $20 million. He's put it on our tab for a pre-conference conference he wanted in Fiji. Now, he had invited top world leaders like the heads of Britain, France and Japan, and strangely enough, none of them want to come. They've got better things to do than hobnob with Bowen in Fiji. So he's paying the lot himself, or we are. Sounds like an awful waste, Matt.
Well, I said before we bid for the Climate Jamboree last year that this risked being Voice 2.0. And after we lost our bid to host the big show, I thought, well, maybe we've dodged a bullet and it won't cost us that much. But Chris Bowen's still trying to reach the same cost almost as what the voice referendum meant. I mean, we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis right now. People are struggling to pay their power bills. The cost of everything is going through the roof. Interest rates in this country, the interest rates on government debt are the highest in the developed world. That's flowing through to mortgage rates. People just can't afford basic things. Yet this government's wasting now over $100 million of your money, another $20 million announced today on a bunch of climate conferences that allow lots of officials from around the world to live it up in five-star accommodation, travel in luxury to these beautiful locations. I mean, it seems like the only reason they're very concerned about the Pacific is it's a great way to come and stay when it's pretty cold in Northern Europe and America. I just think this should be scrapped. It is not doing anything to protect the environment. It's just costing Australian taxpayers money. Why are we doing this rubbish?
Now, before I got to you, Matt, I was talking to Dr. Peter Reid about the Great Barrier Reef, near record coral cover. Big surprise. He's very upset that is not getting political backing for a campaign called Check the Science of all these measures, particularly hitting farmers. There are restrictions on runoff along the Queensland coast. Do you back a Check the Science move to see just what are we paying hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars for to save the reef? What are we getting out of this?
Look, I absolutely do, Andrew, because that's what science should be about. I mean, you should always be checking the science. That's the basic principle of the scientific method. That nothing's ever completely proven. There's hypotheses that haven't been disproven. And the way we advance scientific knowledge is to constantly check those hypotheses against their predictions. I fear that we've stopped doing that in a range of areas because the so-called scientific consensus is there to help keep a whole lot of money coming into particular areas, not actually to advance human knowledge. So absolutely we should check the science. In fact, what we really need is accountability. There's got to be public accountability because as you've played tonight, you could have your whole show. You have your whole show on people saying the Great Barrier Reef's going to die and we're all going to be ruined, so everyone's hand in hand in this sector. They've all proven to be wrong. So where is accountability? Someone needs to be held to account for those predictions.
I had a list of 10 other former predictions about the death of the reef. I had to cull them to the best. I mean, unbelievable how that's been exploited. Matt Canavan, thank you very much indeed for your time. After the break, Victorian Opposition Leader Jess Wilson. Jess Wilson is the woman who's got to save Victoria from the worst government ever to destroy that state. And if she's ultra cautious, who can blame her? Big responsibility. Plus, she last November became the youngest Liberal leader at just 35. Only one leader before her was even younger, Jeff Kennett at 34, and he was a very different character, more freewheeling. But Wilson she's a lawyer, former staffer of then Federal Treasurer Josh Frydenberg, demonstrates the dilemma faced by every leader in this gotcha age. Do you react to questions by being quite human, informal, relatable, and risk making a mistake? Or do you go ultra scripted, less likely to make a mistake, but then be seen as robotic? And so far, Wilson has gone robotic, shown incredible discipline, selling slogans, policies, not herself. And very impressive in its way, and it seems to be working for her. But the price has been you don't get the warmth. Now, I'll give you a strange example. I was asked by her staff to say what topics we'd discuss tonight. And I said, well, your father might be one. He was himself a state politician. What did you learn from him? Oh, you can't ask that. If you do, she'll probably call this off, her office said. She's her own person. That's strange. And I wasn't putting up with that. And as it turned out, the interview did go ahead, as you'll see, and Wilson already had her political lines about her father prepared, even before I asked my question. Now, I know that Wilson is not there to charm, but to win and to fix a state that Labor has left in terrible debt, about to hit $200 billion. But I must say her policies are equally extremely cautious, like backing the Labor government's planned legislation to make working from home a right. when employers are screaming blue murder about it, and when even new Premier Ben Carroll was today asking for more time after all to consult.
I want to be very clear. I support work from home. I support flexible work. It is good for working families. Equally, though, we need to make sure that our economy, everyone knows it's a partnership between working families and the business community and the government.
Yeah, leave it till after the election. Yeah, smart. Huh. Now, Carroll's a bit of an automaton himself, as you saw then. So maybe that's the kind of politician we must expect now. Although I've got to say, you know, Pauline Hanson, Barnaby Joyce, New South Wales Premier Chris Minns, I think they show how it can be done differently. You can be human. Anyway, that's the backstory to the interview I recorded a few hours ago with Jess Wilson to learn something about the woman promising to save Victoria. Jess Wilson, thank you so much for joining me. I've got to start with a gripe. You know, this government has left the state so broke that our roads are potholed like I've never seen since I last was in India. My wife just burst 4 tyres in 2 years. One pothole yesterday, as you probably know, took out 40 cars on the Princess Highway. Now, what amazes me is that you're standing there because you just finished going around every electorate in Victoria. Tell me, how many tyres did you lose on that voyage?
Well, it's great to be with you, Andrew, and you're spot on. The neglect of Victoria's roads under this Labor government is an utter disgrace. And we're hearing every day about these craters in the middle of our roads that are meaning the Victorians are less safe. But to your point, they're busting their tyres, they're busting their rims, and that's costing them thousands of dollars at a time they can least afford it. I've spent the past couple of weeks on the road travelling around and visiting every electorate in Victoria, all 88, and I was dodging potholes like everybody else. We were going up the Hume one afternoon and there were craters in the middle of our major highway and there were 6 or 7 cars on the side of the road changing tyres because this government has mismanaged the books for a decade and now we're paying the price through unsafe roads and roads littered with potholes.
Well, if the answer is you didn't burst the tyre, I think you should pay that driver a little raise for being a bit of a Fangio. Oh, that's a dated reference to the Formula One. Jess, what amazes me, or Jess Wilson,
but can I say, Andrew, how important it is that we... I was just going to say how important it is that we actually fix the roads. It's easy to complain about them, but we've got a plan, a $5 billion plan to repair and rebuild our roads, eliminating 1 million potholes, but actually doing the work to do the preventative maintenance, make sure that the taxpayer dollar is going further and repairing our roads properly so that they're safe to drive on for Victorians, getting the basics right in this state.
Oh, good political messaging there, which brings me to this, though. You're only 36. When I was 36, you wouldn't have put me in charge of a kindergarten, let alone the state. So I'm very impressed. Now that you've got a good shot at saving Victoria from the most disastrous government I've ever witnessed, how overwhelmed did you feel when you first got this job?
Well, when I put up my hand, I had a clear sense of purpose about why I wanted to take on the leader of the Liberal Party and the leader of the opposition here in Victoria. The state is on its knees. It is broken, whether it's the record levels of debt, the record levels of crime, the fact it takes longer to get an ambulance today than it did a decade ago, or that more basic sense of malaise and pessimism that has come over Victoria under this Labor government, that lack of hope here. And the reason I put up my hand, Andrew, is because I had a plan. I had a plan to fix it. I had a sense of what my priorities would be and how important it is in coming to the leadership to actually make sure that you have that sense of purpose, you know what you want to do, and you set out that strategy and that plan and you follow it every single day. Now, leadership isn't easy. Being the leader of the opposition certainly isn't easy, but I have this view that it shouldn't be easy. Becoming the Premier, seeking to govern this state, it should be hard. You should have to work for it. You should have to demonstrate that you have the plan and you have the solutions, and you should have to earn the trust of Victorians. But I put up my hand because I know that we can do this, but more importantly, we must save Victoria. And I know I have the plan, I have the team, and we are ready to come to government this November and actually fix Victoria if we are given that opportunity and that honour.
But you see, it's quite interesting. I'm asking about Jess Wilson, but I'm getting a very tight political lines, and I've been quite impressed by that in a sense. You don't deviate from that at all. And even for this interview, I was told not to talk to you even about your father, even though you said in your first speech you're your father's daughter and you'd hope to make him proud. Is this just you being very disciplined? Is this how you tick? Or are you, worried about making a mistake with so much at stake? Because I get that.
Well, I know that I've got a job to do on behalf of Victorians, and I get up every single day in this state, Andrew, because I love Victoria. I'm doing this because I'm a proud Victorian, and it's not the place that I grew up in. And you mentioned my dad. My dad is someone I certainly look up to and I admire, because he taught me that value of hard work and how important it is to have a strong work ethic. He taught me about the contest of ideas and how important it is to fight for what you believe in and to fight for others as well. So I have that instilled in me from a very young age. But then I'm a mum now. I've got a little boy who's nearly 2 years old, and I want him to have every opportunity that I had when I was growing up. I had a lovely childhood here in Victoria. I remember it with a real sense of nostalgia for the late 90s, the early 2000s here, where it felt like this state was operating on all cylinders and gave every kid every opportunity. And I want my little boy to have that again. And that's certainly what drives me every day when I get up early and I come home late. And sometimes, I don't get the opportunity to see him or put him to bed. But I'm fighting for his future and the future of young Victorians right around this state to fix this state and make sure that it is a place, once again, where there's hope and there's that sense of opportunity.
Oh, you should see, honestly, the chalk and cheese between the Victoria I came to, more than 40-something years ago, and what it is now. Honestly, it's a disgrace that it should be driven to this position. But the caution I'm talking about from you that I see is even on policies now. The state is so broke, right? But you said you won't even sack public servants. You're going to get numbers down by just not replacing them, and more strength to that. But can Victoria afford to take it slow and cautious after the utter devastation caused by this government?
Well, we've been very upfront with Victorians that we're not going to be able to fix everything overnight. Victoria faces immense challenges. You know them well, the $200 billion worth of debt in just a few years' time, the fact that we have record levels of crime, our roads that are unsafe to drive on. And I will be honest with Victorians, we can't fix all of that on day one, but we can take the disciplined, we can take the gradual and the methodical decisions that will ensure that we fix the budget. A hiring freeze on back office workers will save us $22 billion over the next decade, Andrew, and ensure that we get the public service back in line with population growth here in Victoria. Because under Labor, it has grown by 60%, while our population has only grown by 19%. And that is not ensuring that we have the frontline services that we desperately need. The police, the AMBOs, the teachers, the nurses. So my focus is how do we slow down the growth in the back office and actually ensure we put those savings and back in our frontline and essential services so that Victorians can get the basics and they can get access to the services that they need.
No problem with that, and I know that once you've got a massive public service, that's too many voters to offend by going too hard. But I just wonder whether we've got the time for cautious like that. Talking about caution, you've also said you're going to pass the government's legislation making working from home a right. Now, I work from home, but, that's between me and the employer. I don't know about a right. I know you want to make some changes in that legislation the government's passing on, but how can you just say, I'll go along with that when employers are already so burdened and so up in arms about this law?
Well, we've been working closely with business groups, with employers on the amendments that we've put forward in the Parliament. But what we've seen today is a government in chaos, a government that has had many positions on this legislation over the past few weeks. A new Premier coming out and saying that he was going to reconsider work from home, and now today pulling it even from being debated in the upper house. Absolute shambles here in the Parliament under the Labor government. And you asked me before about when I came to the leadership and when I was thinking about what my priorities would be and what my focus would be and what my purpose would be. But what we've seen from Ben Carroll today is the very fact that he was not ready. He was not up to the job. He was not ready. And now we're seeing the shambles of the Parliament here with a government that doesn't know what direction it's taking.
Jess Wilson, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Andrew.
After the break, Donald Trump limits vaccinations that are used here too, repeating a hoax claim about autism. Donald Trump picked some wild people for his administration. One is his health secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's now persuaded the president to limit vaccinations of children and separate vaccinations of measles, mumps and rubella instead of giving the 3-in-1 shot that's also given to children here. Maybe that's good, maybe it's not. But then Trump repeated the line, long pushed by Kennedy, against the medical evidence that there was a link between vaccinations like that and autism.
Decades ago, children received only a small fraction of the vaccines required today. In those times, people were much healthier, and of course, the high rates of autism now observed did not exist.
This is just crazy and dangerous. I mean, this conspiracy theory that vaccines caused autism in children, that made big headlines in 1998 when the Lancet Medical Journal published a paper by 13 doctors and scientists making that link with the triple vaccine. But the lead author, Andrew Wakefield, turned out to have cherry-picked data, even fake data, failed to disclose huge vested interests. The $1 million are being paid by lawyers, for instance, to prove that link. The $50 million a year he expected to earn with his own diagnostic kit for the fake syndrome he claimed to have discovered from all this. 10 of his co-authors then retracted their support for their own paper, which was then pulled by Lancet, and Wakefield was struck off as a doctor for falsifying evidence. But the damage was done. Vaccination rates in Britain and the US fell, measles among children rose, and children died. But Wakefield, he just moved to America, still claiming innocence, and made a film promoting his discredited claims, widely and wildly discredited claims. Robert Kennedy, though, had already picked up on them, writing a piece for the Rolling Stone magazine in 2005. Linking, yes, mercury and child vaccination to autism again. But that article also had to be retracted because mercury in the form of thimerosal had never actually been used in child vaccinations and hadn't been used in any vaccinations at all since 2001. But now here's the President of the United States breathing more life into that deadly fake scare. I spoke earlier to my Tuesday regular, Sean Spicer, Donald Trump's first White House press secretary. Sean Spicer, great to see you again. Sean, what is it with the president of vaccines? You know, look, I can understand being sceptical about giving the COVID vaccine to children, given the extremely low risk of the virus to them. But linking this to autism, I mean, who still believes in that link?
Well, there's two things that I think the president announced today that are important. One, and I got to be honest with you, I don't know about Australia's vaccine schedule, but when you look at a lot of other countries, they don't jam them all in kids at once, which is what they're doing here in the United States. Our schedule is much more expansive than it is in many places. Number two, the timing of it early and all at once is, again, not something that you see. And then third, though, just in terms of your question, look, I worked for a boss early in the early 2000s and was looking for these causal links between mercury and vaccines. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a pharmaceutical executive. But what I do know, and what I think the president pointed out today that's interesting, is there is this massive link about increase in autism in particular when they started changing the schedule and what was in the vaccines, particularly in the case of mercury. I think, Andrew, to be honest with you, I'm shocked that people don't want to look. If you knew that this amount of autism was on the rise and we weren't looking for causation, I think that would be the malpractice. Now, I'm not one of those people because I don't have the scientific background to claim that there is anything. What I do know is that when you see jumps like the ones that we've seen in this country, at least, I think it makes sense for the government to start taking a look at what's going on, what might be causing this. I have no idea if it's vaccine related or not, but I do know that it makes sense to look at them considering the massive lobby that exists in our pharmaceutical industry here in the United States between the politicians and the media. Everybody gets paid off by big pharma here. And I think that to actually stop once in a while, examine the science, examine the studies, and have the data go where it goes is smart.
Yeah, I agree. Look into it. But scientists have looked into it and said this is based on a 1998 paper that was a fraud. The guy resigned. His fellow researchers quit, distanced themselves from the result. It was actual fraud. So they have looked. So that's not the issue for me. But, you know, I do accept that there's a lot of scepticism about the medical profession after some of the lies and exaggerations that were told in the COVID debate. I think that's a lot of what's fueling this.
There's some of that. Look, I've been in the military 27 years. For a long time, we were told to get the anthrax vaccine, and don't worry, it was safe. And then studies came out to say, well, maybe not so much. There is a history in this country of the government jabbing us with stuff or telling us that it was okay and safe, and then finding out retrospectively that that was not the case. We are now finding out that the text messages from Anthony Fauci's phone show that there was a much greater risk, especially for pregnant women, than they ever alluded to during the pandemic. So unfortunately, our public health here in the United States has not been transparent. It has not been truthful. COVID wasn't the first time. And more we find out about how our government public health agencies have been corrupted by big money, by big pharma, by big food.
Look, I got that. I just hope that, you know, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has got a few kangaroos loose in the top paddock, and I hope his latest conspiracy theory doesn't lead to dead kids. That's my concern. Now, you and I have talked before, Sean, about how hard-left anti-Israel candidates from or close to the Democratic Socialists are gaining power in the Democratic Party itself. Boy, I have to tell you, it's not taking long to see how bad an idea this is. The man who last week won the Democratic nomination to be the senator for Michigan, Abdul al-Sayed, has been campaigning and working with hard-left Islamist and podcaster Hassan Piker, who 6 years ago said America deserved the September 11 terrorist attack that killed around 3,000 Americans. Here he is.
America deserved 9/11, dude.
And now here is that candidate, al-Sayed, last weekend dismissing that, old news, you know, I don't know, taken out of context, whatever. Here he is.
You know, to sit here and play gotcha politics with a dumb thing somebody said out of context that they disavowed themselves to say, oh, well, what does that mean about what you think? I want to be held accountable for what I say and what I do, rather than this idea that we're so stuck in cancel culture that all of us agreed was a bad idea back in 2020, but we seem to want to bring back.
Well, that makes me really worried, that kind of stuff. Do you buy that excuse?
I could probably go off for about an hour and a half without stopping. Number one, the way that the media in this country has allowed this to occur. Number two, if anyone on the right, you know as well as I do, you and I have had conversations with some of the people that have associated with Donald Trump, and the media has not let it go. The idea that he palled around with this guy and openly was proud about it during his primary. He was proud of it. And suddenly, once he got the nomination, realized this isn't going to serve me well in a general election. Remember, America is about to commemorate the 25th anniversary of 9/11. And this is a guy who, up until a couple of weeks ago, was proud to pal around with him. But, Andrew, I got to tell you, the funny thing is, that was last week's news. Tomorrow, the Democratic Party in Wisconsin is going to nominate a candidate for governor, Francesca Hong, who wanted to cancel Thanksgiving in America, who said that she was upset about her own son's proximity to whiteness. Now, get this, Andrew. I want you to sit down when I tell you this. She married, this Francesca Hong is Korean. She married a white man, and her baby, no kidding, guess what happened? Came out half white. She was shocked that he has proximity to whiteness. Now, I don't know if she has a biology problem and didn't understand that that would happen, but the reality is that she somehow feels bad for her kid because she had this wasn't an arranged marriage, by the way. In America, we don't do that. So somehow she is going to become the nominee for governor. And even AOC, who is the godmother of the Democratic Socialists, tried to disavow herself from that politics this weekend, claiming that woke 1.0 was crazy. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up anymore. But this is where the Democratic Party in the United States is these days. It has gotten so crazy that even AOC is denouncing people.
So racist, so anti-Semitic, so irrational, so full of hate. I don't know. I mean, it's a mirror image of what the Democrats used to think they were about. To me, it's just extraordinary. Sean Spicer, thank you so much indeed.
All right. See you next week. Have a great one.
After the break, a council orders shop signs to include English. Is that racist or more inclusive? Some interesting language today from a Liberal frontbencher, Ben Small, federal Liberal. He has accused the Albanese government of funding ghettoisation, with its Supporting Multicultural Communities program, $170 million worth of your money. And yes, indeed, multiculturalism is a government program to keep us apart, keep us in tribes. I've said so for decades, really. And speaking of, a Sydney council, multi-ethnic Strathfield, has voted to make it compulsory for local businesses to include English in its shop signs and not just say, Chinese or Arabic only, so that Australians feel welcomed, other Australians, not like strangers in their own land, as I suspect is the case with a few Melbourne ethnic enclaves now as well. Joining me, Amir Schlicht, Executive Director of the Samuel Griffith Society, and Michael Danby, former federal Labor politician and former chairman of the Joint Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade. Amir, all shop signs on the facade should include English, at least in this council area. Good idea.
Look, I think it's an important conversation, Andrew, to have. I think if we want to be a successful multi-ethnic democracy here in Australia, that requires far more than celebrating our diversity. It actually does require integration. And I think that's an idea that many politicians here in Australia have shied away from this term. And look, the biggest indicators of successful integration are things like community participation and a shared sense of belonging. And so I think this idea that we should have communities where there are limited barriers to participation and all people in those communities, regardless of their background, are able to freely participate in those communities and feel a sense of belonging in those communities is really important. And that goes a long way if we are going to achieve this multi-ethnic democracy that so many people in Australia here celebrate. And I do think it's a bit ironic that we've seen a few people on the left start shouting now about government overreach when I didn't hear any of them complaining about all the council regulations about the hours businesses can be open, the colour of shop fronts, how tall a building can be. There's no complaints about any of that, but all of a sudden now we're going to start talking about government overreach.
Well, I guess that's an improvement in one sense. Michael, should all shop signs, announcing what the business is on the outside, include an English hint at what they're doing?
Well, Andrew, isn't it interesting that the move for this came from inside Strathfield, from the council? If it had been imposed from outside, I would have thought, people would be able to debate it more. But Strathfield's pretty confronting when you go there. It was an Italian suburb, Italian Australians, and now is mainly Asian. But I think the more important point is that MP you're quoting, talking about the money given to ethnic organisations, like the money given to environmental organisations, like this huge scam that you've exposed about them subsidising Channel 9, and that's on top of the huge scam that is the ABC, $1.2 billion, who've just noticed, by the way, Andrew, the Prime Minister's Benny Hill persona that was exposed on this program, started on this program a month ago.
Well, speaking of that, Mia, Anthony Albanese's melons scandal, do you believe the Labor women like Minister for Women, what a joke, Katie Gallagher, insisting today, oh no, Albanese wasn't making a joke about the Japanese Prime Minister's breasts, not at all, misinterpreted, out of context, whatever. What do you make of that?
I think this Albanese government is taking Australians for absolute fools. Like, you've got to be kidding me. It was a crude, crass, gross comment that was made, and the fact that Albanese is digging his heels in and refusing to apologise, I think just speaks volumes. This is a Prime Minister who makes mistakes all the time and refuses to own up to them and seems to cover up these lies upon lies, whether it's things like falling off the stage and refusing to admit that happened, to bigger blunders like this where he's offended a really crucial ally to Australia and is refusing to own up to that apology. And as you've pointed out, Andrew, on this program before, she gifted him a melon, and now you have Albanese talking about melons. Come on, all Australians can see straight through that, and I think I will say it again, he's taking us for absolute fools if he thinks that we're not going to see through these lies.
Well, Michael, you've known Anthony Albanese. Maybe that's not really him. It's wrong to suggest that he could tell such a joke.
Rubbish. Like Katie Gallagher, he's a hard socialist left ideologue, and particularly with the socialist left women ministers, doesn't it just show how unprincipled they are? Instead of speaking up about how offensive this is to women and calling their own Prime Minister to get out there and do a press conference and apologise and get it behind him, it's tortuous to watch Plibersek and Gallagher make these explanations. It's so unprincipled and just shows that the Finance Minister is, as Kimberly Kitching described her, a mean girl, a really mean girl.
Mia, one reason that One Nation, I think, is doing so great in the polls, they all say, oh, it's about resentment and anger. No, it's just funny, as in like entertainment. For example, this clip it released yesterday after some of its young supporters infiltrated an anti-Hanson protest, a stunt that I frankly doubt any of the mainstream parties would try themselves. Have a look.
What are you here for today?
I'm introducing my niece to activism.
There you go. How old's your niece?
6.5.
6.5, there you go.
That we shouldn't be using children to push any political agenda, especially harmful ones that can lead to real deaths.
$1 billion is $1 million. So that means if someone has $1 billion, they could own 1 million average price houses in Australia. Please explain. Gina Reinhardt could buy enough houses for half the population of Australia. These things people don't get by how much $1 billion is. She could buy every one of them a house at $1 million.
Mia, what does that tell you, a clip like that, about the kind of people that hate One Nation and apparently Gina Reinhardt?
Well, look, Andrew, I'm the first one to point out that I cannot stand social media stunts from our political parties, from our politicians. I often find it cringe. I often get frustrated because I think it's a whole waste of taxpayer money. And I'm the first person to criticise it. But I will say, clips like these from One Nation, you're right, they're just funny. And I think they do resonate with a lot of Australians. Rather than looking at these politicians doing 30-second TikTok dances that no one can relate to and are finding incredibly cringe, instead I think many people can relate to these One Nation clips where they're engaging with these particular individuals who have incredibly unsophisticated arguments. And many of us can relate to being in those arguments thinking, really, you're calling me racist for having these pretty reasonable views? And I think that's why One Nation really is cutting through the spin, because people can relate.
Michael, I'd ask you too, but you drew my attention to a story in The Nightly about 2 underwater internet cables off the West Australian coast that have been cut on the weekend, and it looks suspicious. No one knows how. In the 30 seconds we have left, what does that tell you? Well,
the submarine base is going to be built in West Australia. This is, in my view, it's Beijing showing that what it can do in times of a military conflict, and it's being practiced very extensively around Taiwan and by the Russians and the Chinese in the Baltic Sea against Germans in the Baltic states.
It has, and I think that's very frightening. And don't let us not forget that a little Chinese flotilla circumnavigated Australia over some of the tracks of the cables undersea, and who knows what they found. Mia Schlicht, Michael Danby, thank you very much for your time. Up next, Sharry Markson. Good night.